Welcome to ReConnect with Plant Wisdom. I'm your host, Tigrila Gardenia, nature-inspired mentor and leadership coach. In this podcast, I share ancient and modern knowledge from biology to spirituality about the wondrous ways in which plants can help you lead a naturally conscious life. Hello, everyone. Welcome back to another episode of ReConnect with Plant Wisdom. It's me, Tigrila Gardenia. So this episode, I knew this episode was going to be good. I knew it was going to be good, but I didn't know it was going to be this good. Seriously, I'm speechless. So this is episode 47, a very fascinating conversation with Laurie Baker, where we talk about natural spirituality. So this is really about seeking wholeness with natural spirituality. And we still had so much more to talk about, but we ended up having to close it down because, we can't just go on forever. So it is my extreme pleasure to invite you all to listen to episode 47, Seeking Wholeness with Natural Spirituality with Laurie Baker. Laurie, I have been looking forward to this conversation for a while. Because for a long time, for those that don't know, Laurie, at the very beginning when I started my podcast, Laurie used to help me by asking me questions. So she would send me questions that she thought were good ideas to use in the podcast. And so now we're going to turn the tables. And I'm going to ask her a set of the questions that she originally asked me. But before we start, Laurie Baker, who is Laurie Baker?
Yes, we always start with the hardest questions, don't we? The first thing that comes to mind is the Bonnie Raitt song, "I am an old woman named after my mother." But because I don't know, for some reason that song is like one of my, earworms or something. But I am an old woman, and I relish this. Like, I have wanted to be old pretty much since I was born. And so at this point, who is Laurie is like this aggregate, this integration, this accumulation of all this stuff, most of which I hated when it was happening. And now it's like rich and juicy. And as a writer, which I am a writer, it's very helpful to have had a lot of challenging moments in life. And I'm also I'm a student of spiritual healing. I've been a student of other spiritual disciplines in the past, and I mean, in the sense of I've done classes and gotten some certifications and stuff like that. Nothing ever really took. Actually, my very first job at 16 was as a healer, in the sense of I was a nurse's aide in a little hospital in a little town in North Dakota in the 60s. And it's a life theme for me. And I have finally found in the Damanhur Academy and the School for Spiritual Healers the fit that I have spent my whole life looking for.
Well, I'm going to tell you a little bit of the words. Here are the words that come to mind when I think
Okay.
about Laurie. I think for sure crone, in the best sense of the word, like you just said. It's like you've wanted to be old your entire life, and in that beautiful kind of that rich, understanding way, because you've really lived your experiences. Writer for sure, editor, poet, because even when you write, your words sound like poetry. When we're in the writing group, we talk about this all the time when you're not around. We're like, Laurie just somehow makes everything sound like poetry. So actor,
Yes.
journalist, activist,
Yes.
community creator.
Yes.
And there are so many more that I could just keep listing. I mean, true multipotentialite in the flesh.
Like you, I had a fairly long stint in the corporate world as a project manager, which is a thing not a lot of
Right?
people know. And, I fell into, activism and leadership around homelessness, and, it's not a place I ever intended to go, but that is, um, definitely tapped a deep well in me for, um, the needs of all beings, you know?
Our conversation today that I really wanted to have was all around the idea of natural spirituality. I'm going to be honest, I know we're going to waver through and we're going to weave through a bunch of other topics because there are other things that I know will naturally come up in this conversation, and that's what I love. But I wanted to ask about the natural spirituality, especially because now that you're in the School for Spiritual Healers, you've been now to Dom and Her, we've talked about different experiences. And at the same time, I know you've had deep relationships with different plants and trees, even the cottonwoods, which I'll let you tell the story of the cottonwoods near your home, and the whole story around their relationship with them. So taking a step back from, yeah, sure, there is different titles given to spiritual naturalism or naturalistic spirituality, which is all a whole naturalistic philosophy with spirituality. Some people instead think of it more as a paganistic aspect of spirituality, like looking at more nature-based spirits and like Celtic and Druidic work. Take a step back from all
Mhm.
of that for a second. Given your own personal experience with the natural world and your deep relationship with trees and other plants, and your spiritual healing journey and your spiritual journey in general, how would you define it? What does natural spirituality really look like to you?
It very much is, um, on the one hand, kind of an exploration of wholeness, I would say, or a search for wholeness. And there is no wholeness if you're just by yourself and an individual trying to do trying to make yourself what be better or whatever language you use around something like spiritual growth. It's not a thing that a, an individual tiny spark like me can do. It requires co-creation. And so, um, from our time together, from my time in NCC, it's changed my definition somewhat, and it really comes down to that notion of spirituality is practice, it's connection, and it's co-creation to me. And it's not a thing that's separate from any aspect of my everyday life, um, or my extraordinary life. I mean, it's it's sort of everything to me, which I know sounds kind of cliched or small, but it's true, and I don't know how to express um, the way that it has taught me that, and the way that the trees in particular, and the elements really have taught me that I am never alone. I'm never on my own in the dark without a guide and a path. It's always there. And
I mean, I was saying this when we did our naturally conscious leadership group call the other day, and we were having our group call, which is part of Flourishing Sprouts that you're in and you've been in for so long. And we were having the call, and I said, ultimately, sometime the farther I go down my path, the more I get to the corny terms that everybody uses, but that I always kind of try to avoid, the kumbaya sort of love word, and yet that's where we
yes, it
end up.
is.
Like the more I was even contemplating on this morning as I was doing my morning journaling after my breath work, and I was really kind of tapping into myself, and I was realizing that it is so much. I mean, I had a really challenging day yesterday, and I went to sleep though with peace, even though it was an extremely challenging day. And after, I surrendered all of that out and kind of went deeper into myself. And I woke up this morning as I was journaling, everything kind of came back to self-love. Everything came back to how the pieces fit together. So I agree with you that natural spirituality only, I mean, I understand that for some it's about, the divinities or this particular, or going out into the woods. It is all of it. And that's, I think, the most interesting
Mm-hmm.
part. It's about living according to our own nature, and the own path that gets created. And I think that really is the core of it. It's like I build a healthy identity and I work in the world, but not based on something else or some other person's kind of definition on me, but more about the definition that comes when I reconnect all those different aspects of myself, like my plantness, and I step back into the fact that I am animal and my
Mm-hmm.
animalness. And I also get into like the sedentary part of my rockness and my mineralness. And then I move outwards towards my divineness. And I bring all of these pieces of me together, which I access through different ways, right? I might access them through a particular plant or a particular tree, or I might access them through to a particular divinity in that per
Yeah.
moment because of all of my personalities. But in the end, what I'm really just doing is putting together through these various different elements the complete, like you said, that wholeness, that whole picture of
Mm-hmm.
myself.
And I also really I really rely on what I mean, we all come up with our own words for how we talk about what our inner life is, right? And I have long since I began doing yoga in the late 70s, I've always thought of it as the inner teacher because when I started, I would be trying to have a pose and I would feel hands on my body, turning an arm or repositioning a foot or a hip or something. And that, as an adult, that was the beginning of, oh, something is helping me. So I really think about it as inner teacher, but I have come to understand that that inner teacher includes my Christmas cactus, which this is telling me to mention her right now.
Isn't it funny how they do
Yeah.
that? Isn't it funny?
She is beautifully in bloom, though. So, my God, she's gorgeous. So gorgeous. She's a little late blooming this year, but then so am I. So
That's all
she
good.
waited till after New Year's, like a smart Sarisi Christmas cactus. Um, I wanted to say yesterday, just as an example of feeling that plantness, that animalness. Yesterday, I was swimming at the pool, and I found myself at the end of the swim. I had to. I didn't want to put my fins back on, so I put them on my hands. And so I swam because they're kind of short fins, right? They're not like really big floppy things. And I swam as first as sea turtle, but then I discovered, oh no, this is frog. This is me being a frog. And it was that sense of these big webby um front legs that moved me through the water, and it was so much fun. And then I laid them on the side or whatever and just laid in the water for a while and had an experience as um, as 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 lotus, or as lily pad. Really, we always think of the flower, but how that lily pad plays with the water and the air, flipping up a little bit here and twisting a little bit there. It was so much fun. And I want everybody to like go get in the water and be a sea turtle, be a lily pad. For me, the connection is so rich there, right? It's like just me, lily pad, divinity, whatever.
I agree, and I think that goes back, right? Like that, those natural elements of remembrance, they trigger that
Mhm.
part of us that we sort of suppress, that we condition out of ourselves to respond in that way. If you remember, just recently when I was doing live commentary on a paper that was all around plant sensing, which you can find on inside of the Naturally Conscious community as well as on my YouTube channel and my website, that live commentary was all about the how plants, how scientists are starting to talk more about when they're looking at plant sensing what it's taking them towards and understanding in a deeper relationship with plants. But that because they're scientists, they can't talk about
Mhm.
it. But the author of it is a dancer. And so the way she got into the understanding, the way she got to the understanding was through that movement by dancing like a plant, by mimicking the tropisms, the different kinds of movements that plants make. She was able to then enter into a deeper, richer understanding, which led to a change in vocabulary for her. And I know that this is a subject also that's close to your heart, like it is to mine. The whole idea that our vocabulary today is extremely limited. Last night I was listening to a presentation by a writer who's a science communicator who's written two books connected to plants, one about plant intelligence and the other one about the eventual move that we need to make towards plant
Mhm.
rights. And she was discussing about how our language by force divides us because we describe plant sensations and movements through their technical, because we understand how things travel through the body of the plant. And so we discuss it as like the glutamates, processes this way, and then this gets sent out that way, and this goes through the xylem or the phloem for a tree, or blah blah blah. We do it in very technical terms. When we describe ourselves, we say she moved,
Mhm.
we or she made a decision. We don't think about it from the perspective of, well, the neurons traveled through and stimulated the muscle, and then the muscle contracted and therefore she reached. And like, we don't do any of that. And so our vocabulary really separates us. And I think that part of our natural spirituality is to I hate to use the word conquer, but I can't think of a
Awaken?
find, reawaken, reconnect to our inherent vocabulary
Yeah.
also, because if language is going to be our main mode of communication, I think part of also this natural spirituality is rebringing these relationships into our lives through language, and using the creative arts to really re-image this entire long-standing
I
relationship.
agree with that, and I think that sometimes it has to be led by, uh, proprioception, physical sensation. Um, I spend a lot of time in the water as much as I can manage, and I will sometimes just all I'm doing is I'm sensing the cool air on my fingertips, which are out of the water, and the sensations on my palm, which are in the water, and trying to find words for that. And of course, they're very
There
limited.
aren't any.
They're very limited. But I almost need the sensation to drive me to try to find a different expression. And I actually think that this is um I don't know if it's I doubt if it's new to humanity, but I think it's rippling through everyone right now, as part of the great change that I believe that we're in. So
Right. Well, and in this case, as a person who speaks multiple languages, and just recently I was pulled into a meeting that was for the editing of some magical texts here at Delmenhur. We were editing them. I was being asked as a native English speaker to work with two people who are native Italian speakers, but one of them spends most of her time doing things in English. Actually, both of them do. So they're both very fluent, like in English, but they're native Italian speakers. I'm very fluent in Italian, but a native English speaker. But we're all people who love words. And what the reason I was being pulled into this meeting was because, and being pulled into this work, was that they were asking for us to revise all of the magical texts, because the language, English in particular, different than other languages, is extremely malleable and is transforming, they were telling me, at record speed, in the sense that as humanity is reawakening, as more of the magic and the spiritual aspects become codified in, or become aware to not just a select niche, but instead start to permeate through, then they are very quickly, for language perspective, they're rapidly being codified into the
well,
language. And this was awesome to
yeah,
hear.
just in the way that we are using key and kin, and we're not alone in that. How many people read Braiding Sweetgrass and at least got introduced to the idea, what has the trans and non-binary movement done for, at least in the English language, for us revealing some of the inadequacies of our ability to talk. I don't know how that is in Italian. I'm very curious about that, although I don't think we want to go down that road. Maybe another time. Uh,
Well, I'll tell you after, because Dominiher is about to have their first kind of conference on this
ooh,
topic on
ooh,
gender, and so yeah, I'll tell you after that happens because I did discover recently how it's being termed in certain areas of Spanish. Because as you know, I'm a native
right.
Spanish speaker, so I have learned a little bit there. But for example, yeah, Italian, and I do think that this is again the key, the kin, right? The pronouns for nature, for elements and beings in nature, even just a discussion from species to being, the idea that you are, or personhood, like we're really going into this. And I do think that it ties into it to the spiritual perspective because it's really about the original term of natural spiritualism or natural spirituality wasn't so much about divinities and deities and all of the things that we assume about the when we think of the word spiritual, but it was really more about identity. It was really much more about a almost like a natural, like what we're hearing more of eco psychology from the perspective. It's about, but taking that a step further, right? The expression through your creative passions, the integration of this shadow self, something that I think gets talked about in a perspective that's very different when you look at it through the relationship and through the lens of an ecosystem. A shadow is not considered a scary,
Ooh,
negative, bad place in the world of an ecosystem. It's considered another type of environment. And so the idea that we have always put shadow work into the negative, we've always put shadow work as something that is about looking at bad parts of yourself, or when instead shadow is just discovering the other side of a quality and how it operates when it's been taken out of the light. And that can be extremely useful and
and
positive, right? It's
fascinating.
what we talk about
It's
relating. And
it's
exactly.
it's
So
very much moving, the beginnings. Think we are still in the beginning stages of moving away from this dualism and this and it's so beautiful. My heart rejoices. You had asked me about the beliefs that we need to unpack around spirituality, and I really wanted to address that with you, mostly because I want to hear what you think. I am thinking that the real issue is that we need the continued uncoupling from religious dogma. In other words, creed versus covenant. When I think about the Dominhurian Constitution, for example, to me that's a covenant. Um, I'm a Unitarian Universalist. We operate from a covenant. These are things we agree to try to live by, like principles, as opposed to do this or you're bad.
or
Yeah, or
else.
else. um, and I was more curious about your answer to that question than I was to mine than I was about mine.
Well, I think you're absolutely right, that um, it's not. Here's where I struggle. It is religion, but it's not only, in the sense that I think anything, and we could use pretty much almost any example, anything that gets used in as a tool for controlling the way that you should think
Mm.
is I think really the true breakthrough, because I have even seen spiritual philosophies that it's like you
Oh,
must do
sure,
this type of
sure.
thing. And I think that that's the most difficult aspect of this, and of what really needs to be unpacked is that most people are not given, or don't take, I don't know, it's a little bit of both, the opportunity to really freely explore themselves
Mm.
and to consciously choose their belief systems, which, if you look at it from a Kabbalistic perspective, Or even if you look at it as an ecosystem, I'll take both examples. But from a Kabbalistic perspective, right, you have the tree of life. Most people can imagine the image of the tree of life, and it has three pillars, right? The pillar of religion, the pillar of philosophy, and then the middle pillar. The pillar of philosophy is a pillar that's very loose. It's very much based on movement and taking action and such. The pillar of religion, in this particular case, is really more about containment. It's about rules, it's about structures, it's about
Yeah.
order. And you have the middle pillar that kind of brings these two together in the way that they should be. I'll give you, I use this
Mm,
example often. My mother travels the pillar of religion, but her religion was consciously chosen. She studied everything. She studied Judaism, Catholicism, different aspects of Christianity, metaphysics. For years, she studied a lot of different things, enjoying all of them. You know, she's been told by like priests that she should become a priestess because my mother has all these different abilities and whatever. But she got to the place where the pillar of philosophy, which was very open and broad and stuff, didn't work for her. She's like, I need rules.
mm,
I feel most comfortable under a set of rules. She still studies, so she doesn't take other people's rules. She reads her Bible. She's become a Baptist, and in a very beautiful, personal way. She does not believe on inflicting it on anybody else. She doesn't believe on pushing it into anything. She reads the Bible herself. She listens to everybody else's opinions, but she makes a choice. She made a choice to restrict her life. And whether it doesn't matter what I think about it or not, that's not the
right.
point. It was a
That's choice.
choice. And and the fact that she actually made it as a choice, and she's always told me, I wanted a simple, peaceful life. I got to a place where all of this other stuff, I just didn't. I didn't want it. Didn't come, maybe it did come from traumas. Maybe it did come from things. It doesn't matter because she made a choice to go down this path. And she's very happy with that choice. It's very fulfilling to her, and it allows us to have very fluid conversations because it doesn't come from a place of fear. It comes from a place of choice, of
Hmm.
empowerment for her. Where I think most people don't do that. They don't choose their religion based on that, because when you do that, then the prejudices against others start to fade away. On the flip side of this, I had a conversation with somebody when I was in Egypt. I had a conversation with our guide, and I was asking him about his religious beliefs, and he was the great example of the opposite of that. He's like, I practice, I'm a practicing Muslim because I grew up as a practicing Muslim. And I'm like, yeah, but have you ever asked yourself some questions about it? And he's like, no. He's like, I don't question it. I don't think about it. I just do it.
Mm.
And that's the one that leads to, like you said, all this dualism and separation and all kinds of different aspects like that.
And well, and I mean, that even may be okay for him, but the way that it then gets inflicted on his children, the next generation, and then, this, like, oh, such bars on the cage. My goodness.
And that's it. And I think that going back again, when I look at natural spirituality and I go and I use the example of an ecosystem, right? An ecosystem is constantly transforming. I could have a temperate forest, but the borders of that temperate forest change
Mhm.
over time, right? Sometimes it's a little farther in, sometimes it takes a little bit more space. So these ecotones get created, these spaces between the edges of the temperate forest and whatever might be the next ecosystem afterwards, which might be human made or it might not be. And so these are very fluid and moving, which gives the participants in it, the beings that are inside of this, to a certain extent, a flexibility of movement and of motion and of shape and of being able to explore different aspects. Certainly, the tree that is in the middle of the temperate forest will always be inside of the temperate forest, right? Because it's going to be hard that center is going to change. But we have to think about it in the sense of a tree doesn't live the key's existence over one life, like, or it's over a long period of time. And maybe it is true that in the bottom part that is the temperate forest, but as that tree grows up, different aspects are in different parts of that temperate forest. So there's a fluidity and a motion and an adaptation that's happening. And as climate changes, as circumstances changes, it could very well be that the whole center of that temperate forest eventually becomes a rainforest, for
Sure.
example. Who knows how that's going to happen. And so I think that the natural world looks more at how does what does my life, my incarnation right now, need in order for it to live, for it to be the most enriched life that I could possibly have for myself. And so it's just a different approach of that sessileness of, you could be, like you said, a Muslim that's living in my Muslim country, and I don't want to investigate it much. It's fine for me. It works. It gives me a place to be. And I'm okay with it, like you said, using the example of that person. But if I'm really comfortable with it, I'm also comfortable with my children choosing
Right.
something different. All right, Laurie, I, I, I know we have another topic to jump into, and I'm so excited. But first, let's take a little break because I want to share one of our eco-conscious business partners with the audience. When you're looking for something to watch to expand your mind and stimulate your perceptions, there is nothing better than Gaia. Gaia offers the largest online resource of conscious expanding videos. Watch, transform, belong. That is the motto of Gaia. Original series. Gaia produces dozens of exclusive original series on topics you won't find anywhere in the mainstream media. The nature of the universe, ancient wisdom, the unexplained, alternative healing, and several shows on Dom and Her, my spiritual eco community. They also have award-winning documentaries and films, yoga and meditation classes. Seriously, there is something for everyone. If you are looking to expand your consciousness, then go straight to Gaia. Just look in the show notes for the link tigrilagardenia.com/Gaia, and there you will find a whole host of channeling and programming that you never expected to see online.
I have been trying to communicate with buckthorn recently. We have this
Mhm.
major buckthorn as an invasive species up here, and it's my little woods is are full of cottonwood and buckthorn, and I realized that I was hating it, that I was buying into what the city says. And I thought, I really need to ask Buckthorn before I decide that that Key is not contributing anything, that they're just taking over. I haven't been super successful yet, but I think it's a longer listen than I originally thought it would be. I kind of thought maybe some great revelation would just show up, because I get those and now and again, so maybe it still will. But that idea of the forest example you were using, you're like, the center will last forever, but no, it won't. The center doesn't hold. That's part of it, right? That's part of the cycle of life, is that eventually the center too moves to the edge.
Yeah, and the conversation around invasives is extremely
Yeah.
broad reaching.
I was
And
trying to attach it to spirituality somehow, but I think it might be too big a jump for right now.
well, I think the part of it that you did bring up that is part of your spiritual is the fact that so the other day I was in a meeting with somebody taking this. I'm going to take the example of buckthorn. I'm going to take it into a real world
Okay.
scenario. So I was recently in a meeting with somebody, and the meeting was it was a big group of us that we were working on something here for Dom and Her, and there was like a person that kept getting up and stating, their opinion, but their opinion was like just one of those offshoots of like, oh my goodness. Like, can we just take the microphone away
Please
from him?
stop
It was one of those
talking.
types of moments. Please stop talking. Please realize that you are the only one that thinks that way, and that's fine. So the person next to me was like, wouldn't it be great if we could just, get rid of certain people? I was like, no. I was like, here's why. It's an archetype that's actually important. And if this person was asked, is the next week this person couldn't come to this meeting, it's almost like I always use the example of Buffy the Vampire Slayer. For those that ever watched that show, when Buffy was killed as the Vampire Slayer, it automatically reawakens another Slayer. So another Slayer gets called. There always has to be one Slayer in the world. There always has to be one antagonist, aka asshole, in the room.
Mhm.
It's a necessary role,
Absolutely.
because if we don't have that role, it will always just make us, if we all agree, it'll make us think that we're right, and we could be going in the wrong direction. So the antagonist is actually a really important role. And so I think that when you're talking about invasive species, it's important for us to approach that conversation with them, going into the natural spirituality, right? As a spiritual being that has been brought and has a purpose, that has a role to play, and that for whatever reason, that role, just like my limiting beliefs can get out of control, my this role can get out of
Mhm.
control. But if you approach it to say, hey, invasive, what, or like, taking over everything, what the heck is going on here that you're taking over everything? Like, you have a role to play in here to keep containment, kind of like mistletoe as a parasite or some other parasite has a kudzu or whatever that keeps everything in check. You're not keeping stuff in check, you're running rampant. Or I think Michelle that often talks about, what is it, Moonflower, I think,
Yeah.
also where she lives. And so I think if we approach the conversation from the perspective of, first and foremost, what was the original role you came in here to play? And then why did that role get out of control? What the hell
Yeah.
happened?
Well,
Type of thing.
and
It might
also
be an
seeing the
interesting way.
good qualities, that I mean, buckthorn is amazing. Probably moonflower
Hmm.
is too. I don't know that. But just trying to appreciate the gifts that they have, whether or not they feel like gifts to me, they're gifts to them.
Yeah, or maybe they're gifts if they're in a lower dosage, right?
Mhm.
The amount of
Mhm.
it is less.
Mhm.
And so it's more like, okay, how do we bring you back into the ecosystem? Or maybe honestly, I mean, sometimes the vision is way more advanced from us, right? We think in a time frame of a certain amount of years where maybe, Buckthorn's thinking, okay, you don't understand, but in 50 or 100 years, this whole land has to change in order for us to keep up with what's happening, what Gaia needs. And so, therefore, and I think that going back to the wholeness conversation, right? Coming back to the place that we were talking about relating to wholeness, I think we have, as human beings, I think now have a difficulty. One of the things I'm working on right now as my own personal development is the understanding of, when am I supposed to, what does it feel like to trust something that I don't necessarily yet see? What does it feel like? When can I get feel like you said, in my body, in my subtle
Mhm.
body, so in my aura? Or what is it, where is it for me that place, that seat that says to me and signals to me, this is correct, even though you have no freaking clue where it's going? Because there is another entity out there, which for some people it's going to be Gaia herself, right? Like the planet, the key self. For some it's going to be some divinity or divine essence or source, or their own divine self. Like, it doesn't really matter what you use. Tasha Silver calls it God, but she calls God she. Others will use some other term, or it doesn't matter. But there is an overall intelligence, if you believe that there's an overall intelligence to the overall game, and that I play a role, and that there are entities that can see my role like a chess game 10 steps ahead of me. How do I tap in, going back to the wholeness and to what really natural spirituality means, is how do I tap in to that whole part of me that has spidey sense beyond my human perceptions, because my human perceptions have been like conditioned away, shortened, lobotomized in some ways, depending on what you look like. So
And yet
my
your fundamental pattern is still there, right? And the song is still trying to
exactly
be sung. You remember we were talking recently about human design and the various kinds of people we are, and I found out I was a manifesting generator, and of course I had no clue. But the thing I mostly have picked up about that is when it's right, I know it. Like, when a thing
right,
you asked me once, why the School for Spiritual Healing, and I really couldn't answer you, but it was because of that very pattern laid in me, that when it's right, I know it and I jump. And
exactly.
I think that there's many, many, many ways that that happens for people. Alice.
Absolutely. Exactly. And I think that that's it. You tie into your true nature.
Yeah.
You are so aligned. It's the place when you're tapped into that true nature, it's the place where all of your bodies, your physical body, your subtle body, your psychological body, like your everything, right? All of it aligns. And like you said, that's where you
And my God,
know.
what a beautiful
Or
feeling that is, isn't it? I I wish, I
exactly.
mean, I wanna be there all the time, and I'm there more than I ever have been, but darn, that's a great sense. When you feel that line within you just, I don't know, vibrating, I guess.
Absolutely. And I think that that's a perfect place for us to stop because I feel like if we keep going, we're going to keep going for
Oh,
hours
yeah.
on this conversation. And this is the beauty of the naturally conscious community, right? The fact that we can have these conversations on a regular basis where we really break down both as individual elements, like, the writing group when we do it this way. And thank you so much because it's thanks to Laurie that the writing group really, truly exists, and she is our writing guru in that perspective to help us kind of push and go and continue to do and to explore this practice as a form of self-expression and of rewriting the
Mhm.
paradigm, right, to all these different pieces. And then sometimes it's through books, and sometimes it's through the master classes, sometimes it's going to be the open discussions we have during iSprouts, our monthly gathering that we do, or in a leadership from a personal as well as a global leadership. So it's like there's all these different ways that we continue to have these conversations. And I'm always so excited when I finish a podcast of the idea that, oh, we can talk more about this. When people come into NCC, they're going to hear the podcast and then they're going to be able to listen
Well,
more. I
it's
mean,
just been my
don't you?
greatest joy of, I mean, of the last, I don't know how long, more than a decade, to find this community and be a part of it. I can't tell you how much grow. I mean, you maybe can see how much growth I've experienced as a result, but I feel it, and what a beautiful community we have, and I so want lots and lots of other people to come and at least dip their toe in the water, right? You never will swim without dipping your toe in the water first.
Absolutely. Thank you so
Thank
much,
you.
Laurie, for
This is
this
really fun.
beautiful conversation. And I am just so excited for others to be able to get to know you, hear you, and see everything that you have to offer.
Thank you very much.
And we'll see each other in the Naturally Conscious community very soon. If you are listening in, this is your opportunity to go over to the Naturally Conscious community right now. The links are in the show notes for you to connect and tell us what you think about this. Tell us what you think about your own natural spirituality and all the various topics that we have over there for you to enjoy. Really, it is the only space online where you could talk about your relationship with the natural world, with the plant kin home, as friends, as collaborator, as mentor, as teacher, and have a group of human beings that are really looking to express a whole new way of being, really a whole new way of wholeness being. Thank you for giving me that word because I'm very excited about that. And like a place for us to really envision and design what we want that to look like with the more than human world, with the plant world, with the rocks, with all the other beings. So this is your opportunity to head over there. That's it for me, Tigrea Gardenia. Thank you so much for watching this episode, and we will talk again next week. Thanks for listening to this episode of ReConnect with Plant Wisdom. Intro and outro music by Steve Shuley and Poinsettia from The Singing Life of Plants. So join me, Tigrila Gardenia, and my plant collaborators next time on ReConnect with Plant Wisdom.